You need to see this exchange between KristenWelker and Trump's UN Ambassador Mike Waltz today, because I promise you, you will not get a more self-contradicting 60 seconds of television than this. Stay with me, because what unfolds here isn't just awkward, it's revealing. It's the kind of moment that makes you stop and ask, how does this even happen in real time?
You raise assets. I want to ask you about the assets. NBC News is reporting the Pentagon is actually rationing some defense weaponry amid diminishing supplies. Is America backing away from a larger military attack because its military stockpile has been depleted?
Well, look, we have to take a step back here in that a lot of stockpiles were depleted, not only from what we gave Ukraine over the last however many years, 4 or 5 years, and the administration inherited, the Secretary Hegseth inherited a depleted situation from not only Ukraine, but also the ongoing fight with the Houthis under the Biden administration and a depleted military under the Biden administration. So they have decided, one, they're going to new types of munitions, cheaper munitions, new technologies, but also with these new defense budgets, rebuilding our great military. However,
but you acknowledge
I want to be clear.
Do you acknowledge they're depleted at this moment?
I want to be crystal clear. The U.S. military, and I've verified this every which way, has everything that it needs to conduct this campaign as effectively as it needs to be. And I have to tell you, the people that are leaking this nonsense deserve to be in jail.
At first, it sounds like a standard political defense. Mike Waltz steps in and begins blaming Joe Biden for a so-called depleted stockpile. That's a familiar narrative, right? We've heard versions of it before. But then, almost immediately, he pivots. In the very next breath, he claims the problem doesn't even exist. And not only that, he suggests that anyone saying otherwise should be jailed. Wait, what? That's not just a contradiction, that's a full collapse of logic in under a minute. And if you're watching closely, you're probably asking yourself the same question, which is it? Is there a problem, or isn't there? Because it can't be both. But let's slow this down and actually engage with his argument for a second. Let's take it seriously, just for the sake of discussion. Let's say, hypothetically, that Joe Biden really did leave behind a depleted stockpile. Okay, fine. Let's go with that premise. Now here's where things get interesting. Donald Trump has now been president for nearly 2 years. Not only that, he's had full control of government during that time. Full control. And with that control has come unprecedented defense spending. We are talking about the largest Pentagon budget in American history. A proposed $1.5 trillion for the next fiscal year alone. That's not a small increase, that's a massive jump. Nearly 44% on top of what was already a record-breaking $1 trillion the year before. So let's ask the obvious question. If the stockpile is still depleted, where did all that money go? This isn't an administration that's been struggling for resources. This isn't a White House that's been starved of funding. This is an administration that has had more money for the military than any other in U.S. history. So if the problem still exists, if it's even real, then at some point, responsibility has to shift. Right? Because you don't get to request $1.5 trillion, celebrate record spending, and then turn around and say, this is still Biden's fault. Not a year and a half later. Not after having full control, full funding, and full authority. At some point, the question becomes unavoidable, is this really about the past, or is it about what's happening right now? And that's where the narrative starts to fall apart. Because if the stockpile is still thin, then it's not just a leftover issue, it's a management issue. It's something that happened on your watch, with your budget, under your leadership. That's how accountability works. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to work. But maybe we shouldn't be surprised. After all, this isn't the first time Mike Waltz has deflected blame. Remember Signalgate? The incident where war plans were discussed in a Signal thread, a thread that he himself started, and somehow, even that got blamed on Joe Biden. Yes, seriously.
The things that I was briefed on very early, Senator, was by the CIA records management folks about the use of Signal as a permissible work use. It is. That is a practice that preceded the current administration to the Biden administration.
Director Ratcliffe, I've got a series of questions. If you're making the statement, making the statement, the Signal is a secure channel.
No, can I answer that? It is
I've got a series of
end-to-end encryption. So
It is,
to finish,
I understand
it is
encryption.
permissible to use to communicate and coordinate for work purposes, provided, Senator, that any decisions that are made are also recorded through formal channels.
Right.
So those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with
So are
those
you saying
processes,
that-
and finally, just please, so
now we are seeing a pattern. And it's not just Mike Waltz. This behavior seems to extend across the entire administration. It's almost like a playbook. When something goes wrong, point backward. Always backward. Let me show you another example. Just a few weeks ago, the Secretary of Agriculture appeared on News Nation and faced similar pushback for doing the exact same thing, deflecting responsibility, shifting blame, avoiding accountability.
Diesel prices now at $5.20 per gallon. It's about $1.50 than before the war started. What do you tell the ag community right now who's dealing with that?
Well, there's no doubt that our farm economy is in a challenging time, right? Inputs under the last administration up by about 40%, even with those diesel prices that you just mentioned. And I'm not underplaying that that's not important, but that's still less than it was during the Biden years. Now, we got it down way lower before Iran happened, but we're still battling to bring those input prices down, not just gas, diesel, fertilizer, seed, labor, et cetera. And those are all coming down, also opening up the markets. But we're going to get there. And the president's leadership on this is paramount. The next year, our exports are going to hit record numbers. Our inputs are going to keep decreasing. And we're going to get out of this in a big way.
I hear you on the Biden administration, but your administration's been in office for 18 months now. And obviously, this is a war under this current president. The blueprint that was just passed calls for $12 billion in farm aid. It's normally a conservative principle of government shouldn't be picking winners and losers, right? And obviously the farmers are getting help while other industries are not. How do you square that?
Well, I think that what we are looking at, and I've really spent a lot of the last 18 months talking about farm security, is national security. The rural America, obviously a very important part of keeping America free and the ideas of our founding fathers. But it's much more than that. It really is national security.
Notice the consistency. No matter the issue, whether it's inflation, the stock market, military readiness, or supply shortages, the answer is always the same. It's always someone else's fault. Usually Joe Biden's. Even long after his administration has ended. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This isn't just about one issue or one policy. It's about a broader philosophy, a way of governing. A pattern where power is embraced, but responsibility is rejected. Where authority is claimed, but accountability is avoided. Think about it. They want control. They want the budget. They want the influence. But when something doesn't go right, suddenly they are powerless. Suddenly they are victims of circumstances they supposedly can't control. How does that make sense? Because traditionally, there's a basic rule in politics: the buck stops with the president. The person in charge owns the outcome, good or bad. But here, that rule seems to have been flipped entirely. In this version of leadership, the buck doesn't stop anywhere. It just keeps moving backward. Forever. Always pointing to the previous administration, no matter how much time has passed. And when that excuse starts to wear thin, when it doesn't hold up under scrutiny, something else happens. The tone shifts. Instead of acknowledging the contradiction, instead of clarifying the position, the response becomes aggressive. Defensive. Even threatening. In this case, Waltz's response to being caught in a contradiction wasn't to explain, it was to attack. To suggest that people raising questions should face consequences. And that raises an even bigger question: what happens when asking questions becomes the problem? Because that's not accountability. That's the opposite of accountability. It's a system where the narrative matters more than the facts. Where consistency is optional, but loyalty is required. Where the response to criticism isn't reflection, it's retaliation. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because in just 60 seconds of live television, we saw that entire framework break down. We saw what happens when a narrative can't keep up with reality. When two opposing claims collide in real time. You can't say there's a problem, and that it doesn't exist at the same time. So which is it? That's the question that remains unanswered. And it's the question that viewers, like you, are left to figure out. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about one interview or one policy. It's about trust. It's about credibility. And it's about whether the people in charge are willing to take responsibility for what happens under their watch. So what do you think? Is this just politics as usual, or is it something bigger? Are we witnessing a communication breakdown, or a deeper shift in how accountability is handled? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next, because stories like this are unfolding every single day. And we're here to break them down for you in real time.